So I promised you I would follow up on the attack on Moscow last night. It is Monday, October 27th, 2025, and here's the follow-up. So Moscow has been building up this image of how invulnerable and how powerful and in command it is, especially since the sanctions hit. And it was kind of popped last night. Well, okay, maybe a slow leak, not a total pop, but let's look at what happened just day over day. Ukraine is apparently carrying out a saturation strike on the Russian capital in Moscow. Well, it was a saturation strike into Russia. It was only partially in Moscow. Ukrainian drones and drone alerts are being reported in Moscow and a number of these cities. And as we saw this, it was coming from Ukraine into Moscow, air defense missile being fired off in Moscow. We can see things like that. And one of the things that they went after was an oil refinery, which is completely within their modus operandi. I mean, like, this is the way that they operate. They're going after things like this. The Serpukhov fuel depot, 95 kilometers south of the Kremlin in Moscow, was struck by Ukrainian drones. But again, it was threatening the city of Moscow as well. So you saw things like this, like these guys on the back of a truck with a machine gun. And this was one of the things that if you're anywhere on social media looking at this, it's like everywhere. This is right next to the Kremlin. If you pan out, like, this is one of the spires around the Kremlin, and this is a look at it. Here's where this location was, of where they were relative to the Kremlin itself. Okay, now, within the span of 5 hours, this was an early report starting just before 10 p.m. Sunday Moscow time. Russian defense units down 28 drones, said the mayor of Russia's capital. Okay, so the reports kept coming. There was apparently some kind of hit on a building out here. We don't know exactly what it was, but that was on Telegram. And it looks like this might have been Russia shooting itself in the process. It might have been an errant drone, but it might have been Russia actually, like, its own air defense doing that. Here's the report this morning. It took a long time to comb through all this morning. By the way, I do these every day. If you want to be up to date on what's going on, please hit subscribe and you'll never miss what's going on. Moscow rocked by explosions as Russia says 193 drones downed overnight barrage. So 193 total. Now, not 193 going after Moscow, 193 going into Russia somewhere. Okay. Russia's defense ministry said on Monday it had downed 193 Ukrainian drones. Now, when they say they downed them, they mean it hit the earth. It doesn't mean that it hit the earth out of its own volition or because they did it. It could be on its own volition, like it was targeting, but there was 193 at least. According to the ministry, 40 drones were shot down over the Moscow region, including 34 heading directly toward the capital. We had that 34 figure last night before I went to sleep. Another 47 were intercepted over the Bryansk region, which borders Ukraine, as well as 42 over Kaluga and 32 over Tula. Okay. Flights were briefly suspended at the airports. Operations resumed about 2 hours later, so that wasn't that disruptive. A fire broke out at an oil depot in Serpukhov. Another blaze was reported in a wooded area of Kamaturka within the city limits. Okay, so you're getting to see like what was on, and like here's the Telegram information. I'll show you the image of that in just a moment. Translated, this was the second major drone attack on Moscow in a month. In late September, air defenses shot down 41 drones over 2 days. And here's the translation. Just after the explosions, smoke was visible in Kamenarka, part of Moscow. According to eyewitness photos, Astra has geolocated the footage, and they were taken in Kamenarka. Smoke visible in the area in the forest near it. Okay, so there wasn't a lot that actually happened. Here's just a little bit more, and I'll explain in context what this actually means. Let me scroll down here. According to the statement, for unknown reasons, an oil depot caught fire in Serpukhov, Moscow region. Fire at the Serpukhov oil depot has since been extinguished. The city administration said an empty fuel tanker had caught fire. Okay, for unknown reasons. Of course, I think I know what the reason was. According to the BBC, citing Russian defense ministry, total of 193 drones were destroyed, 34 of them in the Moscow area. Okay, so it was I think the the symbolism of the attack might have been more impressive than the attack itself. Here is a Radio for Europe giving us a sense of what's going on. Massive drone strike hits Western Russia overnight. Russian officials say 193 Ukrainian drones were shot down, 40 over Moscow region, 34 headed for the capital. And again, they have these rings of defense. A fire also broke out in the Kursk region near a power substation after a reported strike. No casualties were reported. And I'll go into all the other things that have happened last night. But the real big thing is the symbolism of this. Like Putin was just having this meeting where he's up on this stand talking down to, well, Gerasimov's reporting up to him, rather, and talking about how they have this nuclear missile that is unparalleled. There's no analog in the world. And we've surrounded Pokrovsk and we surrounded Kupiansk, and 5,000 armies are encircled here, and 5,000. I showed you yesterday how that's just not true in my last video. Okay, but you'll see it on Russian like propaganda news kind of channels, or like breaking news. Chief of the Russian General Staff Gerasimov, 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers are surrounded in Donetsk and Kupiansk, right? Okay, so they'll do that sort of thing. Now, Gerasimov claimed massive wins in Ukraine, thousands of troops allegedly trapped, but even Russian mill bloggers say it's fake. ISW confirms there's no evidence of the victories Moscow is talking about. So they're trying to puff themselves up. And so that's the whole reason for the balloon imagery here, right? I mean, they're trying to look like there's something big, and this, it kind of destroyed it. Like the Berezhnevsk in the recent Putin presser, it's worth keeping. That's the nuclear missile that they were testing. It's worth keeping in mind that the significant parts of Gerasimov's brief are fictional. There is no mass encirclement of Ukrainian forces at Kupiansk, and a host of other claims are equally untrue. Okay, Jane Key posted this, and I thought this was excellent. The 5 days immediately following U.S. announcement of Russia's sanctions have been a flurry of Kremlin desperation. I used the word panic in a couple of my videos. Desperation is what he's saying here. Sent Dmitriev to the U.S., hitting every news show with "Let's be friends" and "Sanctions will have no effect." Then they also invented huge new battlefield gains that don't actually exist. Again, the encirclement narrative. They announced a new super weapon. They increased strikes on Ukraine's civilian population. It's all probably rehearsed 5 months ago, a self-reinforcing set of narratives. But now, having failed spectacularly, as a real situation can no longer be obscured merely with disinformation. That's right. I think that's a very fair understanding of what's going on. It just you just can't. Okay. Now, meanwhile, what are the Ukrainians doing to the Russians? Well, let's look at this. This is hitting an oil refinery, I think in Luhansk. So these are Ukrainian drones hitting an oil refinery. It's already burning, and they're coming in for a second run here, right? That's what the Ukrainians were doing to the Russians. And then we see this. This is Ukrainian drones striking a Russian P-18 radar Raptor-class boat patrol, the S-400, guarding Belbek Air Base, a Nebo-U radar. This is over the weekend, but I'm not sure if it was last night or within the last couple of days. So, okay. And then we have other things that are happening as well. So here, this is the S-400 battery that the Belbek Air Base that we talked about. Another $15,000 Russian Ka-52 is gone. That's this. The Russians only had 80 to 95 of these before the war. They now have 35 to 50 of them. We're not exactly sure how many. Russia, now, again, Russia is hitting back at Ukraine at the same time. Russia launched 100 attack drones overnight, mostly Shaheds. Ukrainian is down 66 of them. It's not a great record. At least 26 hit 9 locations, and they did some damage. And they began changing their tactics a little bit. Russia has begun attaching 2 anti-tank mine containers under the wings of Shahed drones. Ukrainian sources are reporting this. Several such cases were reported today. The mines are dangerous. Don't touch or approach. They're set to self-destruct. So they're getting more advanced in how they're being destructive. Russians attacked a minibus with a drone in Sumy region. 10 people were injured, including 2 children, age 15 and 8. 2 of the wounded are in serious condition, a child and an adult. And then we see that Russia is doing everything in its power to create a humanitarian catastrophe. They're attacking Ukraine's second largest pharmaceutical distributor, Optima Pharma. The losses here are estimated at over $1 million US. Right. I mean, they're trying to create a catastrophe. President Putin has shifted to destruction of Ukraine from conquering it. Now he pursues this cynical objective, making Ukraine uninhabitable, says the Euromaidan press. It's commentary, but I think they're onto something here. Meanwhile, Zelensky is talking about how Putin boasted that he would occupy all of Donbass by October 15th. Well, I mean, that's just one of his deadlines. He had deadlines that have come and gone and come and gone and come and gone. And this is why he wants political concessions, because he can't actually capture it on his own. According to the Ukrainian president, Putin told his allies in private conversations Russia would occupy the entire Donbas region by mid-October. Zelensky said this in an interview with Axios. And this is why I'm trying to understand, was Gerasimov lying to Putin, or was Putin doing this, having Gerasimov lie to him as a big show in order to try to show their strength? I think it's the latter, but I'm not certain. Tell me what you think in the comments. Okay. So what happened on the battlefield day over day? Very low numbers here. 800. I haven't seen 800 for a long time. 800 Russian casualties. Usually it's closer to 1,000, sometimes more, sometimes a little less, but 800's low. 2 tanks, 3 armored fighting vehicles, 34 artillery systems. But look down here. 138 vehicles and fuel tanks. Now, that's really interesting. 138 vehicles and fuel tanks. Now, it seems to me that whenever we have this scenario where there's really low casualties, really low assaults, this is very high, the vehicles and fuel tanks. And my gut tells me, and I could be wrong, tell me if you know something different in the comments. My gut tells me that it's because when there's not these waves of attacks, they have the luxury of going after things. And that seems to be what's happened here. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian invaders conducted 28 assaults. That's a fairly low number, and it's also low. It's correlated with the number of casualties. Pokrovsk direction, President Zelensky labeled the situation there as difficult, with fierce battles flaring in and out in the regional center. So there are Russians in Pokrovsk. There was something like 200 or 250 that we knew of in Pokrovsk as of yesterday. Urban fighting continues in Pokrovsk as Russian forces, using numerical advantage, infiltrated and spread through parts of the city. In 48 hours, Ukraine eliminated around 104 troops and several vehicles, but fighting is hard and the situation is very difficult. So there were at least 200, probably more like 250. They've eliminated 104. We don't know how many more have come in, but that's what's going on inside Pokrovsk. The fighting is hard there. Okay, Ukrainian MiG-29 carried out an airstrike on a checkpoint targeting a buildup of Russian forces at a border facility. This is after it was struck. This is what it looked like before it was struck. There's the after, there's the before. So, okay. Now, somebody asked me why I hadn't talked about the dam that Ukraine had hit. It's just a matter of you can only cover so many things in this. So before I talk about the dam, let me give my shout out to Al Moser, a graduate Patreon patron. Thank you very much. I don't do these because I have to. I do these because I want to say thank you to those that have stepped up to support me. Okay, let's look at this. Massive flooding in Belgorod region after repeated Ukrainian strikes on the dam. Why? To cut off tens of thousands of Russian soldiers from supply routes. Okay, now I would understand if you looked at this and you thought, well, wait a minute, Ukraine, they're hitting a dam. Well, they were complaining when the Novokahova dam was hit by Russia and created this massive dislocate. Yeah, but they also blew up their own bridges in order to cut off the Russians in the early attack phase to keep them from getting there. So if they're doing this to cut off Russian soldiers' supply routes, that makes a lot more sense of the scenario. Okay, last little bit, Darth Putin, the longer this war goes on, the more ISIS we look. It kind of does look like that, doesn't it? All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for subscribing. If you have subscribed, thank you for hitting the like. That helps this spread. Put your comments below. Tell me what you think about what you saw here, because I try to read as many as I can. Thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.